There we go. Okay. So thank you for attending this classroom session with Shortcuts. My name is Noah. I'm one of the educators with Shortcuts. And today we're going to be looking at attendance, schedules, and commissions. So these are the basics in Shortcuts. We will do a more advanced version of this a little bit later, and of course we will announce it for everybody. So if you're new to these classroom sessions, we are recording this. This one's a little bit shorter than the usual ones. It's about 30 minutes. And if you're not able to attend, then we will be sharing a link to this later. So if you have to drop out early, that's fine. And of course, if you're watching this video after the fact, we will have the ability to ask questions of us or to give us a call or send us an email. And I'll show you how at the end of the presentation. So of course, we will allow time at the end for questions unless it's something critical, like the audio cutting out. And that was a technical glitch that happened last week. I had an incoming call and that turned off the microphone. So if there's something pressing, if you can't hear me, if the video cuts out, absolutely let me know on the question toolbar that you have with GoToWebinar. So in Shortcuts, what we're going to look at today, the basics with attendance, schedules, and commissions. So it might have been a while since you last set this up, or if you have a new manager or a new front desk person and you need to get them up to speed, we're going to look at how to do some of these basics. For the salons, the spas, the barbershops where the staff has to clock in and out, we're going to look at how to do that. If an employee forgets to clock in or out, we're going to show you how to fix the attendance. And if you have stylists or employees that are on set schedules, whether you set their schedule up for 2 weeks, 2 months, or even an entire year, we're going to show you how to enter a schedule and then how to copy that schedule for as far forward as you need to. So let's look at some of the basics. Clocking in and clocking out. Now, the version of Shortcuts that I will be showing everybody is version 8 of Shortcuts. Many of you may be on version 7 Fusion, as it's more commonly known. So some of these steps may be a little bit different to you. One of the new features in 8 is the staff. If you click on the employee name at the top of the screen, if you're using the appointment book, you can actually give the staff the ability to clock in and clock out right at the top of the screen. It's on the top right. Now, if you're using version 7 of Shortcuts Fusion, you can actually clock in or clock out by going to the Performance button. And again, on the top right, there's a button that says Clock On or Clock Off. So that's just a minor difference between version 8 and version 7. It's a little bit easier to access that from the employee or the walk-in screen. Now, if your staff is clocking in and clocking out, and you just want to see what are their actual hours, what report has that information, you would actually go to the report screen, and the specific one, you go to the employee category and employee hours. So of course you can set a date range. Maybe it was for the past week, the past 2 weeks, and then press view. Shortcuts will actually show you every clock in and clock out on that date range. So you will see who's been in for 10 hours or 12 hours in case somebody made a mistake. And of course you want to fix this before you calculate what the payroll should be, because you don't want the staff saying they were clocked in for 200 hours. So fixing employee attendance. So it's pretty easy to clock in, easy to clock out, but it's also very easy to forget to do this on a busy day. If the staff comes in, they just get right to their chair and get to work, these things can happen. So what you want to do is go to Point of Tools, go to the Tools and go to Attendance. And then you're going to tell Shortcuts what's the date range you want to look at. Do you want to look at this week, last week, or the past 2 weeks? Find the error, and there's several ways to fix it. You can actually tell Shortcuts what is the actual clock in or clock off time for that employee, or you can just type in the total number of hours that need to be applied for that day. 7, 8, 9 hours, whatever it is, you can just round up and type in a number there. And if a staff member forgot to clock in, forgot to clock off, you can actually create what's called a shift. So you would select the employee name. When you're in the attendance screen, you would press new, and Shortcuts will say, okay, do you want to add a shift for which day? You'll select the day and then tell Shortcuts what was their start and what was their end time. And then when you rerun those reports, the attendance report, Shortcuts will correct any of the hours that were there previously. So all of the steps that I've just talked about, let's go into the actual Shortcuts point of sale and review them. So I'm going to jump out of the presentation for a moment. And there we go. So I'm on the traditional appointment book. So if you're using the appointment book, specifically in version 8 of Shortcuts, at the very top of the screen, you see my staff names, Andy, Sam, Joe, Stevie, and they have a little green dot next to their name. So Shortcuts is actually telling me or showing me these employees are already on the clock. The green dot signifies they're on the clock. If I click on a name, Andy, for example, at the top right, there's the clock on, clock off button. I can press that, and now Andy is off the clock. And you'll notice the color next to his name, the little dot, changes from green to gray. So that lets me know these employees are not on the clock. Now, if a staff member was clocked on, they were working and they decide they're going to go on break or they're going to go to lunch, and they want to make sure that walk-in customers don't necessarily try to choose them because they're out. If you select their name, at the bottom of the screen, there's actually an away pull-down menu. So Andy can say he's going to be away for 30 minutes and then press the away button. So the color next to his name shows up in orange. So that just lets us know he is on the clock, however he stepped away. Maybe he's going to get some coffee, whatever the case is. When Andy returns, he can press on his name and press the return button at the bottom of the screen. Now, if you're on version 7 of Shortcuts, you don't necessarily have that ability to just clock in the staff from the top of the screen. Instead, the staff or whoever the front desk person is can go to the Performance button under the Main tab. So you go to Performance, and again, you can select the employee's name and press Clock On or Clock Off on the top right corner. So this is available in all versions of Shortcuts, the Performance button. If you're in the Walk-in Manager, and again, this is version 8 of Shortcuts, the Walk-in Manager looks a little bit different than version 7. The employee names are not at the bottom of the screen, they are now at the top of the screen. And just like I could in the appointment book, I can select any employee from up here and clock them on or clock them off. So we've sped up that process, especially if you deal with the Walk-in Manager mainly. So now that we've got a few entries, we've got the staff clocked in, we've got the staff that clocked off. If we want to make sure their hours are correct, we would go to Tools, and under Tools, Reports. So before I run payroll, I want to make sure that all of the staff members were clocked in correctly. So I will go to Employees, my category Employees, and I will go to Employee Hours. So I'm going to view it, and let's say I'm going to view it from last Monday to today. So when the window pops up, I'm going to set my date range. Oh, and I jumped out accidentally. There we go. So I'm going to set my date range. And I'll say from last Monday, so we'll go back to January. Last Monday to today. View. So now Shortcuts is showing me the totals, and sure enough, my staff has been clocked in since last Monday. So clearly there's a mistake here. So I want to make sure that I don't have 168 hours for every employee consecutively. So how do I fix this? So I'm going to press Done. And on the right side, I'm still under Tools, the Tools tab. I'm going to Attendance. So here's the fast way to fix this. all of my employees show that they've been clocked on for almost 200 hours since last week. So the fastest way to fix this is to go to that initial day, which was the 26th. I'll go to the hours column and I'll say, no, you were in for 8 hours that day. And I'll do the same for Joe, and I'll do the same for Sam, and I'll do the same for Stevie. You were in 8 hours, and that should be that. But of course, I've just given my staff and I've corrected their time, and now Shortcuts thinks they only worked that one day, last Tuesday, for 8 hours. So I need to add additional shifts for the days that were missed. So what I would do is I would select Andy's name, for example, and at the bottom of the screen, I'll press New, and Shortcuts will ask me, do I want to add a shift for him? Yes, I do. So I will press yes, and Shortcuts will say for what day? I'll go for the 27th. And Shortcut says from what time to what time? 9 to 5. And there it is. So now I have a Tuesday, Wednesday entry, and I can continue adding shifts for Andy. So again, I can go back to January. I'll go to Thursday. So now he has 3 days, and I would continue the process until Andy's hours have all been corrected. Now, if a staff member completely forgot to clock on, this happen. I've seen it happen where the payroll is done every week, and an employee just would go to their station, cut their hair, get their commissions and everything, but they forgot to clock in and out. If that happens, when you go to this window, you wouldn't necessarily see that employee's name. The employee name will be missing, and the reason for that is because they don't have any entries for that week or that pay period. So the very first thing you should do is enter a clock in and a clock off time for that staff member, even if it's just for a second. So in this case, I'm going to go on my list, and who do I have? I have all my regulars. So I'm going to choose Shortcuts. So of course, Shortcuts would be the help desk, but we'll pretend this is another employee. So our Shortcuts employee forgot to clock in and clock off this past week. The first thing I'll do is I'll select their name and clock them on. And Shortcuts will say, are you clocking on at 9:15? Yes, I am. And immediately, I will actually clock off. So I've only been on the clock for 10 seconds. But now that I've done that, I've told Shortcuts this employee is supposed to have an entry for this period. So when I return to the Tools button and Attendance, the Shortcuts employee is now on the list. And now that the Shortcuts employee is on the list, I can go in and I can add a new shift. And I can correct and say, yes, the Shortcuts employee was supposed to be in yesterday, 8 hours, and they forgot. So now I've begun fixing their attendance. So keep that in mind. If you don't see an employee on your list when you're fixing the attendance, then you need to create an entry. Even if it's just for a second, you're going to go to Performance, choose that employee, and clock them on and clock them off right away. Now, Shortcuts will allow you to go to the attendance and fix how long they were supposed to be here. Okay, so let's jump back to the presentation. Now, those were the easy steps. Clocking in, clocking out, fixing attendance. What if you have schedules that your staff are supposed to be going by? So for salons, for spas, very important. We want to make sure that the right employees are available when they're available, if they're going on vacation, if they have days off. We want to make sure all of that's correct, especially if you're using online booking. You don't want customers to book staff when they're not there. So in Tools, Schedule, or you can go to Set Up Employees and enter the schedule. And what you're supposed to do is enter a schedule for an entire week. Or if you have alternating weekends, for example, for some staff members, enter the schedule for at least 2 weeks. Once you've entered a schedule for at least 7 consecutive days, then Shortcuts will actually let you copy that period for as far forward as you have to. So I'm going to talk about copying the schedule, but for most of you, it's better to see it in action. But what you're supposed to do, once you mark a 7-day period, including days on, days off, you're going to press Mark Cells, select the first day of the shift, which is technically the first day of your working week, whether it's Sunday or Monday, and then your second cell is the last day of the week. And again, whether that's Friday or Saturday, whatever the 7th day is. Shortcuts will highlight all of the days in between, and when you right-click, Shortcuts will actually let you copy that schedule until a certain date. And again, whether you copy the schedule for 2 weeks or a month or half the year, you can absolutely put an end date and Shortcuts will repeat that pattern. So let's actually see it in action. So again, there's 2 ways to get to that screen. Under Tools, I can go to Schedule, or under Setup, Setup Employees, I also have a Schedule button at the bottom of the screen. Now, I've already entered the schedule for my staff, but I'm going to wipe it out for Andy, for example. So I'm going to go to all of his days and delete whatever was there. So I'm going to start with a completely blank schedule. Okay, so Andy, on the very first column, he doesn't have a schedule for this week, and I want to set his new schedule for February until August. So what I'm going to do is Mondays I'm closed, so I'll leave that alone. But Tuesday, I'll click on Tuesday, and he has a normal working shift from 9 to 6 when my business is open. So I will press Done. What about Tuesday? Again, or Wednesday. Wednesday, again, 9 to 6. Thursday, he's actually in from 9 to 3. Same with Friday, he's in from 9 to 3. Saturday, Andy is off. So when I click on that day, at the top right, I'm going to change his shift type to day off. So this is important for the people that are booking online. If I specifically tell Shortcuts this day off, if a customer prefers Andy and they try to book him for a Saturday, Shortcuts will say, sorry, he's not available, choose another employee. So super important if you're using online booking. Also self-check-in. So he's off Saturday, but he is working Sunday, 9 to 5. So I've just created a 1-week schedule for Andy. So I need to copy this going forwards, and I'm going to replace what was there previously. So to do that, and I'll answer the question in just a second. So I'm going to copy Andy's schedule. At the top left, I'll press Mark Cells. The first cell is Monday. Even though I'm closed Monday, I'm still going to select that day. So once I've selected yesterday, Shortcuts then says, what is the second cell, which is the last day of the week, my Sunday. And if you notice, everything in between just got highlighted. So now if I right-click, I can copy this schedule until, so for Andy, that's actually his schedule until August. And I'll choose the last Sunday in August, the 29th. Shortcuts will say, now, this period already has a schedule in it. Do I want to replace these hours with these new hours? Yes, I do. And just like that, Andy's schedule has been updated. Now, don't forget to press Unmark Cells when you're done. Now, somebody had a question. Let me take a look at this question for a moment. And Taylor has a question. Can you clear the entire schedule at once, or do you have to delete each individual shift? Good question, Taylor. So let's say your schedules were royally messed up and you just need to start from scratch. Normally you would have to clear them one day at a time, But here's a faster way to copy that. So for example, the business and the shortcuts employees, they don't have schedules because these are just used for tracking purposes. So I can actually press mark cells and copy the business schedule from Monday to Sunday on my second to last column. You notice how it just got highlighted. If I hold down the Alt key on my keyboard, I can click and drag, and let's say I'm going to clear out Sam's schedule. Shortcuts will say, are you sure you want to clear out his entries? Yes, I do. And I can do the same for Joe. And I can do the same for Stevie. So I've just cleared out 3 employees relatively quickly. The other thing you can do is I'm going to press unmarked cells. So I have Sam, Joe, and Stevie. Their schedules are cleared for this week. However, next week, their old schedule is still in there. So I want to clear it out for the rest of the year. So I can actually press mark cells, begin with Sam, and go to Stevie's Sunday. And I've actually selected 3 columns at the same time. So now I can copy schedule until, and I'll clear it out for the rest of the year. So I've just cleared out 3 schedules, and I can begin now with this week and create brand new schedules. Now, if Joe's schedule was almost the same as Andy's, instead of going one day at a time, I can actually copy Andy's schedule over to Joe. Again, I will press mark cells, choose Andy's work week, and once those days are highlighted, again, hold down the Alt key and drag Andy's schedule over to Joe. And there it is. Don't forget to press unmarked cells on the top left. Otherwise, Shortcuts thinks you still want to highlight more days of the week. So now that I've copied the schedule over, the only difference between Joe and Andy is Joe is working on Saturday, normal shift, but he is off on Sunday. So rather than having to go through every day of the week, I just had to fix 2 days. Now, in the case of Andy and Joe, they have almost identical schedules, and I'm going to copy Joe's schedule down for another week, just manually. So what they like to do is Joe and Andy actually alternate weekends. So this week, Andy is off Saturday, Joe is working Saturday. Next week, they're going to reverse. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select Andy's next week and say Andy has a day on. He's a normal shift on Saturday, and next Sunday he is off. And I'll reverse it for Joe. I'll say Joe has a day off next Saturday, but he is working next Sunday. Okay, so now that I've done that, I want to make sure that I can copy a 2-week alternating schedule. So it's the process is the same. I would press mark cells. I would choose Monday, but I would not stop at this Sunday. I would stop at next Sunday. So I've actually selected 2 weeks for Andy's schedule. And now when I right click, I can copy that updated schedule until the end of August. So now Shortcuts will alternate weekends for Andy. And then I can do the same thing for Joe. Start with this Monday into next Sunday, right click, and say that's also Joe's schedule until the end of August. And just like that, they have alternating schedules for the next few months. Now, Tony has another question. Hold on just a second. Let's take a look at Tony's question. In the clock in, clock off section, you mentioned that was an away feature. Is it possible if staff is away, would the online booking match the away as well? What away does is it doesn't necessarily say the employee is away in online booking, it actually adjusts the time that they're available if you have self check-in. A lot of our spa customers, a lot of our barbershop customers that use Shortcuts, they actually have a wall board, or they have a tablet where the customers can check in, and it will actually show the estimated wait time based on who's available. If the customer prefers a certain employee, when they select that employee, if the employee is marked away for a certain time, that availability of the staff member will then be calculated and it'll display on the self check-in screen or on the wall board. So that's where the effect can visually be seen. That's where it takes place. For online booking, you don't necessarily see an away option. It's either the employee is available at this time or not. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so I've now gone through how to copy a schedule going forwards, how to copy a schedule in between employees, and how to even do an alternating schedule for the staff. So I'll go ahead and I'll just punch in the hours for everybody else. And I'll just copy that over for Sam. I'll make his identical to Andy, and same with Stevie. Oops, I misdragged that one. So if you enter all of your staff schedules for a 1 week period, and I'm going to make sure that everybody is not off on the same day. So I'm actually going to select, starting with Andy, going to Stevie's Sunday, all 4 of my employees, and I'm going to right click and set all of their schedules until August. So you don't necessarily have to go one column at a time. You can actually just copy everybody's schedule going forwards. And I will unmark cells when I'm done. So let's go back to the presentation. Oh, before I do, let's take a look at that report. So previously, when I ran the report for the last period, it said there was 168 hours for the staff. Now when I go to employee hours and I run the same week, we should now see the correct entries. So I'll go back to January. So from the 26th through today, let's take a look. View. There we go. So 24 hours, 8 hours, 8 hours. So that makes much more sense than 168 consecutive hours. Okay, let's go back to the presentation. And that is actually the basics on attendance. So you should now know how to clock in, how to clock off, how to fix the employee attendance, how to set schedules, how to copy them going forwards, and how to copy them across other staff members. So if you're using online booking, it really is critical that you get schedules into the system, even for days off. Don't just leave the day blank. Tell Shortcuts this is a day off. And the reason you do this for the staff members is because if the business is open, your business hours are showing, and an employee doesn't have a schedule entered, then Shortcuts assumes all of your employees are available. So a customer can go online and book a staff member when they're not supposed to be there. So it's critical that you get them in the system. So now we're going to open up the floor for any questions that you may have. So on the right side of your screen, or wherever the pop-up is for your GoToWebinar, you should have a questions or even a chat window. So I'll bring those up. I'll give you a second to bring them up on your side. And let's take a look. I think I answered Taylor's question with regards to clearing the schedule. Taylor has a follow-up. Is there a way to determine the color coding of the schedule? Yes, there is. So let's go back to Shortcuts. So when I'm setting my schedule, so the blue on the attendance shows that that's a day off. Gray lets me know that's a standard working shift. So can I adjust these colors? For example, if somebody's taking a vacation on a certain day, that's yet a different color, green. If somebody has a sick day, again, that's another color. You do have the ability to set these colors. If you go to Setup, Configuration, so on the left side of the screen, Setup Configuration, this opens up a new menu. That is the only button in Shortcuts that will give you access to this, the Configuration button. Under the General tab on the left side, you're going to scroll down and there's a schedule setting. This is where Shortcuts is pulling the colors from. So if a day off makes more sense to you to be in red or burgundy or another color, you can absolutely set that. Plus, you can set additional shift types. So for example, are you allowing, let's say on weekends, is the only time you're allowing customers to do walk-ins? Then you can set a weekend shift. And on the right side, there's actually a checkbox that's allowing walk-ins, but it is not allowing bookings. So keep that in mind if you're creating custom shifts. Okay, I hope that answers the question, Taylor. Soki has a question. Let's see. Does breaks get deducted from the total hours calculated each day? On some of the reports, that is the case, Soki. It will not include break times, but it will display on your reports. Taylor has a follow-up. We are only opening our schedule 1 month at a time. Okay, and that's understandable. And we recently turned on the online booking. Even though we don't have schedules uploaded for May, clients can still book an appointment online. Is there a way to prevent this? Yes. Taylor, there's actually a couple of ways to address that. So let's say because of the pandemic, you're very cautious about what's going to be available. One of the ways to deal with that is when you're setting the schedules, and I'll again use my staff as the example, I will actually set the month of May moving forwards, all of those days are off for the staff. So even though the business is technically open, if a customer tries to book anybody, none of my staff is available. That's one way. And then as you start to get the okay, then you can copy this week's schedule into the middle of May or into the end of May, whatever the case is. That's one way to do it. The other way is if you go to your online booking settings, and I'll actually do that. I'm going to go to the online booking settings for one of my salons. So I'll go to one of the Shortcuts test salons. If you're in the console, the Shortcuts console, it's console.shortcutsoftware.com. If you go to your Book Me settings, near the top of the screen, one of the settings is how many days in advance is a booking allowed. So you might want to change this from 60 or 90 days to just 30 days. So just remember, online booking will let customers book up to 30 days in advance. So that's the other way you can address that. Okay, I hope that answers the question. Okay. Are there other questions with regards to attendance or schedule? I see somebody had their hand raised. Jeff, did you have a question or? Somebody had an error. Tony, did you have a question? Okay, I'm going through the questions again. Schedules, break time. Okay, so Taylor wants to see like what's the fastest way to just schedule everybody off. So again, we're going to use my staff, and on the left side, I'm going to click and drag, and let's say I want to begin in May. So I just want to clear it out for May. Unfortunately, I still have to do one at a time. So I'll say day off I'll start with Andy. So during May, it's a day off every day of the week. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. This is the most tedious part. Sunday. So normally my business is open Tuesday through Sunday, but I just marked Andy's schedule off in May to be completely off, just days off that week. So I will press mark cells and I will choose Andy's Monday through Sunday. I'll hold down the Alt key and I'll drag his schedule over to Sam. I'll even drag it over to Joe. And of course, Shortcuts is warning me, hey, he already has a schedule. You sure you want to replace it? Yes, I do. So I've created the same schedule for all four. I'm going to press unmark cells now because I don't want to highlight any more cells. Now I'm going to press mark cells again, start with Andy's Monday and go to Stevie's Sunday. So all four of them have now been selected. And I will right click and I will copy the schedule until, and in this case, I'm going to go through from May until June. So I'll choose the last Sunday in June. So at least from May to June, nobody is available. And I will unmark the cells. So that's the fastest way to do it. It still requires a few button presses, but for at least these four people, that's the fastest way. Okay, Soki has a question. Can you show me one time how to clock in and staff who is an assistant or receptionist and doesn't have a column for scheduling? Good question. So Soki reminds us that the attendance book, as well as the walk-in manager, just shows us the names of the employees that are working behind the chair. So what happens if you have a front desk person, a receptionist, that doesn't show up on this list? In that case, under the main tab, you're going to the performance button. The performance button will show you a list of everybody that's on staff that has a security pin. So you'll be able to select somebody that's not there, like Shortcuts here, my Shortcuts employee, and clock them on. And of course, clock them off from here as well. So performance shows everybody. Okay. So a lot of good questions today. All right, and I'll go back. Let's see. Does anybody else have any questions with regards to attendance or employee performance or schedules? It does take some practice when you're entering schedules in the system. It took me a lot of practice. So don't be scared whenever you see the right click option. Because remember, Shortcuts is also designed to be used on touchscreen displays. So of course, on a touchscreen, you don't have a right click. So when you're marking cells, for example, if I was to press my finger on the display, I would choose Monday through Sunday. So of course, I don't have a right click on a touchscreen. What do? If I hold down my finger on those highlighted cells for about a half second, the right click command pops up. So the same thing actually applies on my appointment book. If I just hold down my finger for a half second on the screen, the right click option pops up. So just keep that in mind. When you're working with Shortcuts and these pop-up windows start happening, it's because Shortcuts thinks you're doing a right click command, even if you're using a mouse. Okay, we had another question, Tony. Can the receptionist/assistant not clock themselves in? So that's an interesting question. Yes, you do have security settings, and this is Tony had the question. You can have security access be changed for certain levels of employees. So if you do not want employees, if you do not want receptionists or anybody to clock themselves in or out, like you only want the manager to do that, you can change that permission. You would go to Setup, Configuration, and on the left side, under the General tab, the very first option is Security. So at the top, you're going to see there's levels and access. So who has employee levels, who has receptionist levels, etc., etc. At the top, you would go to the Access tab and go to the receptionist level or the employee level. And on this window, you actually have a permission that says can be clocked on or off. And you can check or uncheck that permission so that in this case, only the manager or only the owner can clock employees in or out. Additionally, there is another security setting. So usually a front desk employee should have permission to clock other employees on or off. But if you feel like they're maybe abusing that privilege, you can disable that option so that instead they only clock themselves in or out. So you can see there is, for scheduling, the ability to set schedules, to change schedules, delete schedules. So you can take all of those permissions away. Plus, you can hide if they're not supposed to see other employees' breakdowns in the performance screen, things like that, you can take that away. A lot of great questions today. Are there any other questions with regards to attendance or schedules? And just so you know, I believe the next one or the next 2 Wednesdays, I am doing a Spanish version of this classroom session. So if you have a front desk person or a manager that is a native Spanish speaker and would have an easier time, I am doing the attendance classroom in Spanish tomorrow. So for the past few shortcuts classes, whatever I had on Tuesday, I'm doing a Spanish version on Wednesday. So just keep that in mind. So I'm going through the questions again, see if I missed any. I don't think I did. Okay, so thank you all for the questions. That was some really good stuff there. So if you're new to shortcuts, or if you're using a really old build of shortcuts and you decide, okay, I need to start taking advantage of online booking and version 8 of shortcuts, which has a really great integrated payment system with GPI, give us a call. So here's our customer care contact. And if you have a question for education, we're at education@shortcuts.net. Give us a call, leave us a message. And if you check in with us on social media, then we will get back to you. Were we going to go over commissions? That's a good question, Victoria. Let's take a look. If that was on slide 1, then I owe you commissions. Oh, I do. So let's take a look at commissions. I was also going to review that on the advanced class, but we'll go ahead and take a look at that. So as you're setting up schedules, and this is actually connected to employee schedules, on the schedule screen at the bottom, you actually have a commission option. So this depends, of course, on your business, how you're setting commissions. Are you giving the staff a commission for services? Are you giving the staff a commission for retail? Do they get a commission for both? So by default, there are no commissions in shortcuts. You have to create these. And let's explain the screen. So when you go to create a commission, you are presented with a couple of columns. So the first one, the first sample that I created, is sort of a flat commission from $0 to infinite dollars. And infinite dollars is denoted by a bunch of 9s. The staff gets a 50% service commission and a 5% retail commission. So that's regardless of how many services they do or how much retail is set. It's always set to 50 and 5. But perhaps for my receptionist doesn't cut hair, so her commission should be a little bit different. So perhaps I create a commission too. Or maybe my commission too is my sliding scale. So to sort of entice the staff to do a little bit more services, I can say from 0 to 800, they get a 45% service commission. From 800 to 1200, 50. And then above 1200, 55% commission. So what shortcuts will do is, let's say one of my employees did $2,000 worth of services in that period. They would not get 55% of $2,000. What they would get is from $1,200 to $2,000, that commission would be 55%. And then from 800 to 1200, they would get 50% of that. And from the first 800, they would get 45%. So shortcuts will actually add the different percentages up when you go to your commission and wages report. But again, let's say I have a receptionist who doesn't do service but should get a greater retail commission. So I'm going to create a new commission. I'll call it front desk. So once I create a front desk commission, I'll say from $0 to infinite dollars. Of course, my receptionist doesn't do service, but she should get a 15% retail commission. Done. So now that I've created a commission, how do I apply it to the staff? So I'll choose the employee's name, Joe, for example, and on the left side, I'll say he gets commission 1, and I'll save it. And Stevie is my senior guy, so I'll put him on the sliding one, commission 2. Now, what about the retail commission that I just created? I have to press done and go back to employees. And I'll say Sam, he's not just a senior stylist, he's sort of semi-retired, so he'll just be doing some front desk. So I'm giving him the front desk commission. And then eventually I'll take his name off the appointment book. So that's how you assign it. Okay, so good eye, Victoria. I probably have to update my slides to make sure I include the steps for commission. I'm pretty sure the reason I didn't is because I'm going to repeat commissions in the advanced class. Okay, so are there any other questions I can help with? If not, then I think we're going to wrap up this presentation. Thank you all for attending. If you had to drop out early, of course, you're going to get a copy of this later. And if you have any questions after the fact, you can also reach out to us on social media, via our email, and we will get back to you. So thank you all for attending, and I look forward to seeing you on the next classroom session. Have a great day, everybody.